Welcome back to Required Watching, where we watch the essential films from the list of cinematic influencers. And today we're going to be talking. Actually, what? Who am I? I'm Trey, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the 2004 horror comedy, Shaun of the Dead. Um, back in 2004, back in 2004, when Shaun of the Dead hit the theaters, it honestly wasn't like any other zombie movie. It was a masterclass. It was a revelation. It was a breath of fresh air to see how this movie would blend comedy in horror in a way that actually felt unique and fresh. I mean, it was directed by Edgar Wright and the very, very start of the Cornetto trilogy with himself, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost. And it not only paid homage to the zombie genre, but I think redefined it and setting a new standard for horror comedy. We'll explore Edgar Wright and his distinct filmmaking style, his sharp writing, so good, and his attention to detail. I think Shaun of the Dead is genre defining. In which genre exactly this sits in, I'm not quite sure, but this cult classic resonates with people all around the world. In fact, I saw this yesterday at the time of recording this. So it's playing in theaters each October, and it was really, really exciting to watch it with a bunch of people. With that said, let's get into it. So from the very beginning, it was clear that Shaun of the Dead is one of the more, I guess, it's out to spoof zombie movies. It's packed with humor. It's never sacrifices attention or horror elements. I actually think this movie is both genuinely funny, but also genuinely uh, scary. I can't be the only one to think that, and I think that's why this movie resonates with people so much. Um, Obviously, Edgar Wright and his genius is all about his ability to juggle both of those tones without undercutting either. I think he uses his everyday life, or uses the everyday life of Shaun, uh, a slacker who's stuck in his monotonous routine, to set up the stage for the absurdity that follows the zombie apocalypse that strikes London. The contrast between the mundane and the horrific is, I think, the key to the success. I recently watched a film called Baby Assassin. If you want to check that out, I'll link it. It's on a different thing. We don't want to talk about it. But with Baby Assassin, it's kind of the same concept of what we're dealing with, with young women who are assassins, but really they're just dealing with life, and the assassin part of their job is just another day. And I feel like with Shaun of the Dead, we spend a solid half hour, or the first act, looking at his regular life, but we get the sense of just how plain and boring, I suppose, he is. He's literally a zombie in his life, right? And how that's juxtaposed when there's a actual zombie apocalypse where everyone else are the zombies around him, and he has to come to life and be the hero, right? Um, of course, one of the major standout aspects of the film is Edgar Wright's direction. You can't talk about this film without talking about the two one shots of Shaun going from the house to the bodega and back, both before and after the zombie apocalypse actually kicks off. It's everything about his direction is kinetic and fast paced, and of course, I think even he has pulled back on some of his like signature editing style, such as like the quick cuts. But Wright uses visual comedy and transitions that enhance the humor while also driving the story forward. I think that actually goes for the horror as well. I think he really does a good job of blend of using his signature to not only enhance the funny but enhance the genre. And if you look across the Cornetto trilogy, where there are different genres whilst all being comedies, I think he really leans forward into that. Um, of course, if you take the sequence of him going to the corner shop, it's obvious that that zombies have taken over. Right, we're at the very beginning stages, like before he realizes that we can see that something is amiss. The entire first act, we can see that something's wrong, and whether you've seen the movie or not, you are left knowing something that he doesn't know. Um, But of course, when he repeats this aspect and we see how much things change and how little he still doesn't recognize these obvious things happening around him. Um, I think it really speaks to the character of Shaun quite a bit. Um, and I think it also makes the audience feel more engaged in all of the details. I mean, I was catching details. I've seen this movie a few times. I'm catching details on the big screen that I hadn't, or at least I don't remember catching in the 20 years. Geez, 20 years that it's been out. Oh gosh. Wright also uses foreshadowing and another brilliant narrative device that gives the film a layer of depth beyond the surface humor. Many of the lines of dialogue and visual cues early in the movie, of course, become callbacks later on in this movie and, of course, throughout the series. Um, it shows that he can create a tightly woven script with every joke. And I think it feels earned. It doesn't feel cheesy. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything for the sake of anything. Um, we can talk about Chekhov's gun all day long, but he really sets things up that you don't expect to come back, and again, it feels earned when it does. One of the most clever examples, of course, is when they go to when Shaun's plan to go to the Winchester, have a pint, wait for it to all blow over. What begins as a humorous and lazy idea to just survive the apocalypse ends up with the group's actual flawed strategy. It's a running gag that simultaneously reflects Shaun's reluctance to grow up and take responsibility while also underscoring the absurdity of trying to navigate the zombie apocalypse with the same laid back attitude that defined his pre apocalypse life. Now, where would we be if we didn't talk about Simon Pegg's performance as Shaun? I think this, honestly, just it's all on his shoulders, and he perfectly captures the everyday man, or everyday man. He perfectly captures the everyman quality that makes Shaun so relatable, even if he's thrust into extraordinary circumstances. His evolution from like this helpless slacker to the reluctant hero is satisfying. I think when we see, if you've ever read a book about writing anything and talk about the character or the character's journey, the character's journey that they're meant to take throughout, it couldn't be more signposted about our main character Shaun. Um, but I think that is just by the way it feels so effortless by the person who's by the people who write it, but also by the way people are acting it. And I think Shaun, or Simon Pegg anyway, does a great job with this role, as does, of course, Nick Frost. Um, uh, he plays Ed, and he provides, I think, he provides like like heart to the film, despite his character saying silly things. I think and he like Shaun and Ed's relationship and friendship and seeing that on screen is actually something that's really important to the film. Um, I think. Never mind the N word being used. We'll forgive that. It was a different time. Besides being called gay, we'll forgive that. It's a different time, I suppose. Um, but I do think seeing like those kinds of friendships with men is super rare even nowadays. But back 20 years ago, it was even more rare. So being able to have that relationship and see how they both changed, like Ed barely changes, but seeing how they both changed throughout the process is fascinating. Obviously, he goes from this lazy guy to someone who's kind of tested in ways that I guess feel genuine and grounded. The film also succeeds in, I think, proper zombie. It succeeds as a proper zombie horror movie. Of course, it has a comedy aspect to it, but it doesn't skimp on the gore and the tension. I think the zombies' slow moving but relentless attitude are treated with seriousness that they deserve, and it's several scenes, including the bloody climax at the Winchester pub, that feel really intense and nail biting. We are laughing 1 second, we're beating zombies to queen another, but we are feeling saddened when we lose a character, or feeling like, ah. and I think both Simon Pegg and the rest of the cast really do a good job as being an ensemble in the second half. And I think Wright understands that for this comedy to work, the stakes need to be real and feel real. And the film never loses sight of that. We're not losing characters just to lose characters. This film could easily have everyone survive or easily have no one survive. But there's a balance between the laughs and the scares that I think sets this movie apart from other horror comedies. I really can't think of other ones that even sit in this lane. It feels so specific. Um, uh, I guess on a technical level, I think the film showcases Edgar Wright's command of visual storytelling. We talked about that earlier, but his use of the long takes and quick cuts and whip pans and, for lack of a better word, like musical rhythm to, I think about Baby Driver, but I think he has a musical rhythm to the way he directs and the way we see things and the way he wants us to see things on the screen. That really shows that he has a command for the camera, right? A command for the projects, and I think it all feels of course it is choreographed, but it all feels very meticulous in a way. Even when you see it, it feels almost improv-y, almost jokey. I'm sure there was a lot of it. Well, I'm sure there was some of it anyway, but it feels so genuine and real. I think one of the most enduring aspects of the film is its cultural impact. The film introduced the audiences to some really key talent: Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and of course, again, we get the trilogy of films. But we also, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, at the time that we get like Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly doing comedy team ups, and like the Judd Apatow team ups, and the Adam Sandler team ups, to get something this fresh from overseas. It is overseas. I don't know what I quotes, but to get something like this from England felt new. It felt like it carved its own space out, which is what I think filmmakers should be taking from it. It feels so very distinctly British, while of course still being a universal film. This movie fits in with any other movie, any other horror movie, especially any other like horror comedy. But again, it also feels so distinctly British. Like this feels like it had to have come from Shaun. Shaun. It felt like it had to come from Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright's head in order to make this happen. Anyways, I'm afraid to ever call this a parody, but this movie is more than that. It's more than a comedy. It's more than a horror. I think it's a carefully crafted film that blends elements from all over with precision and wit. I think we have direction, we have writing, we have Simon Pegg's relatable performance, and the film's like the film's, I guess, clever writing and the way it stands out against the zombie genre. But also in, I guess, in modern cinema as a whole. I think there's a reason why we're still talking about this film 20 years later. But I think for filmmakers, you can really take away how to own a story. I think you can take away how to write something that feels unique, something that feels stylized, something that is genre, but also kind of. I've been talking to a few people talking about like Trojan horsing their stories into into the things that people want, and I think this is really funny. A funny example of how I don't think Edgar Wright. I'm hesitant to say this, but I think him doing this trilogy, and again, even the next film is wildly different from this film. It definitely has the same tone. I think it has his signature, but like it's very different from this film. But I think he used these to be able to solidify and display the three of them, display what they can do best in order to then get their feet in the door, to then to branch out to other things. What Simon Pegg is on the boys. No spoilers there. And Nick Frost has like what 2-3 movies coming out this year, and Edgar Wright is doing a lot. I think. I know he's had some stuff in development for a while, but I think being able to I definitely think being able to develop your style and do the best you can with even a low budget is really important. But even when you get budgets that are a bit higher, being able to stick to that and develop and learn and grow. Anyways, there's a lot to learn from this film. And I think even if it takes just working with your buddies and being able to grow together and figure out the right project, even something as simple as that is really important. Anyways, long rant over. Of course, this is a required watch. Listen, if you like what you're seeing, what you're hearing, leave a comment down below. Tell me which is your favorite movie of the Cornetto trilogy. And tell me like the movie that should be added to my list. And until next time, peace.